What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined again, friend of the show, David Hazan. Welcome back. It's been too
Thank you for
long,
having
bud. It
me.
has been too
Yeah,
long. Oh,
absolutely.
you,
But I've brought my beard back to
yes.
your screens.
I mean, I listen. If you have a good beard, you always have a spot on this podcast. So,
You be
it's
careful saying that.
I'm just saying, okay. If you shave it, it's I don't know your email address anymore. We're done. But you you were one of when I first started kind of getting into the interviews that I reached out to, and Nottingham was coming out, and it's kind of feels good to have you back on, as Nottingham is kind of sadly but goodly like coming to a close. And I want to hop into all things Nottingham. You have another series coming out from Mad Cave. I want to talk to you about as well. But since it's been so long since we've had a time to chat, if people are new to you, how did you kind of get into creating comics?
I was always into comics related media, but it took some friends of mine going, you need to start reading this stuff, or we will refuse to engage with you in conversation on any on any comics related media. Um, and so they shoved a copy of Batwoman Elegy in my hands, and of course, like it's sort of David Bait in a way that only they could have understood at the time. And next minute, I fell in love with comics, and I have an obsessive personality. So when I like something, I like to take it apart and know how it works. Um, so I started just casually writing scripts, which turned into entering Mad Cave's talent search, almost forgetting to send in my entry, as it turns out. Uh, and then I won, and Nottingham happened, and now I have a career in comics, which is wild.
It's so good. So, if people aren't familiar with the Mad Cave talent search, that's at the time of this recording, it's going on now. It's a really cool thing. I've had a handful of creators that have won, writers, artists. What is the Mad Cave talent search that you won and started to get a career in comics?
So in 2019, I won um, the talent search, which was the second year running. It's now the seventh year running. And that year we had to do a submission from, I think it was either Battle Cats, uh, or a few of the other ones. I did a Battle Cat story, which I'm still kind of nudging Mark about, to be like, what if, what if me and Shane did a Battle Cat story?
Tales from call it Tales from the Battle Cats, right? Like so.
I'm pretty sure that already exists. Just nobody invited me to do it. And I was like,
I'll talk to
I kind
Mark.
of want. I already have.
Well, if two bearded people can attack Mark.
Mm.
So you did it. So you did a Battle Cat story then.
Mhm. Yeah, 10 pages of Battle Cats, and I won, and the rest kind of just happened.
So so then your first book with Mad Cave was Nottingham, which if you are not familiar with Nottingham, like holy buckets, it's fantastic. It When I got the first issue, I was like, I loved it. I had to have you on, and we started talking about it. It blew up. And, everyone was trying to get that first issue, and I was like, "Listen, you all should have listened to me. I told you it was good." So
Six
well, what's
printings
cool?
later.
What's cool about that though has got to be now. When you started with Nottingham with Shane and everyone, did you know? Like, did you have a vision for? We're at what 3 volumes, and that's not including the Tales of Nottingham. You had a free comic book day. Like, did you have a vision for that big of a story, or was this kind of like, I'm gonna tell this story, and if there's possibility to do more, I will.
So it was definitely the latter. However, by issue 3 or 4, just because I had to do a bunch of research into the history to get it in a place that I, well, sort of wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, here's the idea for volume 2. Here's the idea for volume 3. So the ideas were there, and they were in my brain. Um, but yeah, it took, Mad Cave seeing how the first issue really blew up, for us to get a second volume. And then same when the second first issue of the second volume came out, they asked us to do a third and asked me to sort of steer the ship a little bit on Tails.
Yeah.
And it was pretty great.
Um, it's so good because I do feel like volume one, like it wraps up, and if that was all we got, it would have been fine. But I feel like volume two, you're like, I know where I'm going fully, like that leads into volume three, and
Oh yeah.
chef's
Volume
kiss.
two was my Empire Strikes Back.
It's
Like I
yeah,
knew exactly how absolutely wrecked I wanted to leave these characters.
like volume one, you can leave it and be like, you know what, this is fine. If we don't get to go back and visit it, I feel content. If you didn't come back with a volume three after volume two, I would have revolted. Like,
I warned Mad Cave. They had an outline that showed them where the story ended. They knew.
they're like, all right, listen. If someone is listening to the podcast and hasn't gotten to check out, Nottingham from Mad Cave, what is Nottingham about? That's a
So
loaded question now,
Nottingham,
3 volumes deep. And
listen, I have I spent the last couple of weekends tabling at cons. So like the pitch is in my brain, it's right there. Um, it's the Robin Hood legend turned on its head. The sheriff is the protagonist in a medieval police procedural, and he's hunting a serial killer who's murdering the area's tax collectors.
it's so, and then it just gets, and then you just expand on that universe and world, and
Yeah.
it's so good. Uh, I I don't want to get too deep into volume three because it's
We can
wrapping
get
up here.
pretty deep. Like
But
we can get deep enough, you know.
okay. So I mean, you have it of, when did you know that you were gonna have this massive battle for Nottingham? Like when in the process for you, because it kind of leads up to it at the end of volume two, and know that that's where we're headed for volume three.
Yeah. Uh, so I knew in 2019 that this is what we were doing. Like, um, I saw the pieces. So I think it's no spoiler to say that Volume Two really focuses on. So Volume One focuses on setting up the world and
Mhm.
what's, all of the players inside Nottingham. Volume Two sort of expands that world. We go to other places. And really it centers around the kidnapping and ransom of Richard the Lionheart. Volume 3 deals with the historical siege of Nottingham, which is what happened when Richard the Lionheart is released from captivity, comes back to England, and tries to retake his throne from his brother, who had basically been trying to undermine him the entire time. Um, and since Nottingham is all about what's happening to the little guys, while the royals have their very sort of uh, uncaring power struggles, I thought, well, if we go really big with Volume Two, uh, if we draw everything back and make it really intimate and force our characters into a small space, we're going to be in for a sort of a good ride, and I hope I'm delivering on that.
Yes, I think so. And what has been so great about this series is, you say it's a police procedural, and it almost has like a sense of like an old like crime noir a little bit too, of like where you're like, who do you trust, who do you not trust, and like and it just flows so well that like when you think you have something figured out, you don't, as a reader.
That's what I hope. Like that's the goal, right? You never want to sort of reveal too much. I don't feel like I'm very good at writing mysteries per se, but I
Mm.
am good at writing messy people doing messy things. And
That's
also, it's like I do play with when the sheriff figures things out, because you kind of know sort of who has done what. There are a few reveals, I think, in Volume One, and there are a few surprises in Volume Two. But Volume Three, you kind of know who's doing what, and it's just all like heightened drama, heightened emotions, and except for the sheriff, who's kind of this like just grumpy guy. He's the straight man in what's effectively a comedy, really. Um,
ah
and that's how I write it. he's like the guy who's like brings everything back down to earth while everybody is just absolutely inhaling the scenery around him.
Wow. It makes it makes sense, when you put it that way. And what I love about this book too, like, pairing it with Shane's art and coloring,
Ah,
like the team that you have on this book
yeah.
is top notch, like all around.
I can't wait for people to see Shane's creator-owned book that's coming from Mad Cave Prairie Gods. It like those covers, and I've seen little sneaky bits and pieces, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. Shane just posted about it the other day and I was so excited. I was like, yes, let's go. Um, it's just good. I do have to ask, like, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I feel like there was a page towards the end where you tipped your hat a little bit to the fandom, and I appreciated that, and I hope that's what you all did there. On that page spread as you were wrapping up.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
very much.
Okay.
I think that was more Shane than me, though. Think I gave a very sort of like a very broad description of what was on that page and just let him go nuts. And yeah, like it very much, he very much loves that, and so it's like without saying too much.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I was just like, give me like a broad, final shot of Nottingham, and
This
the thing that's in the foreground, and he added some elements that really like will make people happy.
it made me happy, and because it made me happy, like, if you're a fan of, just Robin Hood lore, like, I think it'll make you happy as well, so I don't want to spoil that. I just think you were able to tell a story that's been told a lot in a fresh new way, and I think that is something that is why I gravitated towards it, because it felt familiar, but it wasn't like I still didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know where you were going to take things, and so, like, I appreciate that as a reader, what you are all bringing to this new tale on something that we've seen, in other variations.
Absolutely. And like the other thing is that I still think it's the most comics take you could possibly have on Robin Hood. Like I think the idea came to me after having read what was the Bendis Iron Man where Victor Von Doom is Iron Man, like Infamous Iron Man. I think
Okay,
I had read that,
yeah,
and it just like uh, maybe I was rewatching the BBC's version of Robin Hood or something, and it just like it came to me as if, on a dream. Like I was like, oh, this is really good.
yeah, it works out really well. So, like, how does it feel then as a creator? This is something that you help create from the get-go, and then, like, you're putting closure on it. It seems like this is your time with Nottingham is done. And rightfully so. It feels like it's done, and it could be done. Not to say down the road it doesn't get explored, whatever. But, like, how's that feel then as a creator to kind of a bow on it?
Um, Pretty great, honestly. I think I find endings particularly difficult to write. I don't think that that's, uncommon
Right.
amongst creatives, but this one was hard. Like I pumped out all the issues pretty quick, except for that last one took me a hot minute to like really get my head around. Um, because we were trying to wrap up, 15 issues worth of baggage in 20 something odd pages, and
Yeah.
it's hard. But yeah, no, it felt pretty good. I did have that like sort of numb feeling for a while after,
Yeah.
and definitely missed those characters. And I don't think it's a secret to say that more from this world will be coming. I think Mark has already said that, so I don't feel like I am. You know,
Yeah.
I'm giving you an exclusive, or
Right. But this
spoiling
but
anything.
this
But
main story
the
tale
main story, yeah, we're
is
done.
wrapping it up the way
Yeah,
and it's wrapping up the way y'all wanted to do
trilogy,
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a good trilogy, and it feels good. And I think what I also appreciate as a reader, you said it yourself, creatives, it's hard to sometimes wrap up a story. And there's often times where I'll read, I'm like, oh, this is a great pitch. It feels really like this could be a cool concept. And like you're in a couple issues, and then you go, the ending, and you just go, like it, or the last arc, you're like, like I didn't feel that with Nottingham. And so I hope my experience is the same for others as well. I think you put the dues in that you wanted to tell the story you wanted to tell, and I think the payoff works.
I I do think that I very rarely get the sort of boost of confidence when I turn in a script going, "Oh, I did a great job." But I think with that last issue, I turned that in. I was like, I had that feeling that you rarely get, where it's like, "Damn, I'm actually okay at this."
I got this.
Because most of being a creative is absolute and total delusion.
Yeah. Well, and there's also such a time frame difference too, from like when you wrap up with your time on the book to then where people are going to get the wrap up as a reader, typically from their time. Because when did you
I mean,
finish?
I turned in that last script early this year. I think, we were sort of getting tails out and doing other things.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I only finished that last issue early this year, and
And
yeah,
so
the definite emotional fallout from that was interesting.
it'll be and by the time that comes out, we'll be in the midst of a new series you got coming out from Mad Cave. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so Kosher Mafia is a 5 issue crime miniseries set in the mid 30s in Cleveland, Ohio. And it's about the bookkeeper for the Jewish mob who tries to spur his superiors to make moves against domestic Nazi organizations like the German American Bund, the Silver Shirt Legion, and others. And kind of ends up on the wrong end of an enforcer's gun as a result. And surprisingly, that enforcer is someone who he both fears and despises, and yet is the only person who's willing to help. So
Mm. Where such I got to check out the first issue. I'm hooked right off the bat. Where did this idea come about that you wanted to have when you were thinking of Kosher Mafia?
I wanted to tell a very quintessentially Jewish story. I had just been immersed in a reread of The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
Mm.
So a lot of the setting comes from that, in the sense that, like, we're setting this book in the place and time that, like, our modern comics industry was effectively born. Um, and we're talking about sort of this two mismatched Jewish men from sort of very different places, both in their life and in the world. Um, and I don't know, it all sort of coalesced. And I think it just like the timing, just you can't pick it. You can never pick it, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
But I think it's sort of important and necessary, and I hope everybody, no matter where they sit on the sort of spectrum of what is going on right now, get
right.
something out of it. So
Yeah. Well, and I know like, the Jewish heritage is so, big in comic books and in the early area of comics. I mean, in Cleveland, Ohio, where you've set the book, right, with the creators of Superman in that from that town. Like it's it's a fitting place. So where would the time, like, as you're crafting this, like you do a lot of history research, it seems like, for your books. Well, obviously with Nottingham, was there a lot of kind of digging into the history of that time frame and that era and places and kind of figuring out the story you want to tell?
so I think when I settled on Cleveland, I did about 3 seconds of Google searching and came up with this, like, history paper. Someone had done some sort of thesis on, like, the rise of domestic Nazism in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was like, oh, this is deep. And it was a deep well, and I was like, this is really interesting. And it talked about sort of um some of the different organizations where they were based. I was like, I think it's just because like a lot of Middle America had a lot of German immigration specifically
Mm.
that it kind of it all sort of again it fit together really well. And I'm very excited for people to read it.
Ah. So when this idea came about to you that you wanted to explore this, obviously you had the connection with Mad Cave with Nottingham and stuff. How did you kind of pitch this? How did you kind of create the team that you wanted? Because it's a new team, it seems like on this book. So how did that kind of process happen?
Well, I had originally pitched it elsewhere, and and they'd asked for a full outline, so I had the full outline already done. And I was talking to them at New York Comic Con in 2022. And I was like, could we maybe do something creator owned? They had just sort of announced a few months earlier the
Mm.
opening of the creator owned program at Mad Cave. I was like, I'm ready, let's do it. Here's a thing. And they just leapt full force behind what I'd given them. Um, and they brought in that we sort of had a discussion about what sort of art we want. They brought in Sammy, Ellie, and Simon, and it just all fell together. And Sammy's been so great to work with. Sammy Cabela, for those of you who are listening. Um, Sammy's been so amazing to work with. He just nails it every time. And I look at his art, I'm like, why haven't the big two leaped on this yet? Seriously. Or just like if you look at some of the art from the book, it's like, get this man on a James Bond book stat. Just the way he draws this enforcer, Ephraim Gold, I'm like, this man could be James Bond, you know?
Yeah, that early fight scene with Gold there, um, top notch. Like it sings, and so like when you said James Bond, I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, like I love that vibe. It's such a great art, great team. So how was the process for you then as a writer? I know you've worked with a lot of other teams, but I also know like with Nottingham, you've had your team kind of for a while. Like, did you have to like learn how to kind of do some other stuff, or like was it just like easy breezy of just like same kind of mindset when it was
I mean,
writing?
Sammy is a consummate professional, and I think, like, especially what I learned over the first volume of Nottingham is, um, and obviously it was just my entree into comics as well, right? And same with Shane's. Um, but I just wanted to let the artists do their
Yeah.
thing and not get in their way too much. If there's this a little story element that I'm like think needs to be addressed, I'll throw it in there. But otherwise, I just get out of the way because almost 100% of the time they know what works better on the page than I ever will visually.
Yeah.
And so it's just about letting them do their thing and also asking them the things that they like doing and trying to cater to that. So for example, I was like, Shane, I was talking to Shane. He's like, oh, I'd love to do like an episode in this of issue of Nottingham that's set in the snow. And we tried to make that happen with the free comic book day issue that we did, which I still think is some of my best work. And then for scheduling reasons, we had to bring in Andrea Moody. So I had a second shot at getting Shane to draw the sheriff in the snow when we did Tales from the Cave. So we got 10 pages of of the sheriff at wintertime.
You're you're like, huh, now I gotta write another snow story. Come on.
Exactly. But we made it work. Yeah, and actually that was sort of one of my highlights of last year was getting to write that story that probably not that many people saw, but for those who did, I hope you enjoyed it. I had a blast. I had a blast doing like a really like tight 10 for a Nottingham story rather than, a full 20 something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so cool to see, and like your time with Nottingham and then now with Kosher Mafia. Is You said it's 5 issues. Is this a self-contained story that like
This
this
will
is for you to
be,
tell that you don't
yeah.
imagine expanding?
So I think if I did more of this, we'd do it anthology style. So I'd
Okay.
go different cast, different place and time, different set of, Jewish crime
Right.
organizations. I think that sort of, especially with crime, it works best that way. and some of the greats have proved that. And I have a lot of ideas. So buy this book, please.
Does it change then? Like, obviously by the time you got around like halfway through Nottingham Volume 1, you had an idea that you're probably going to get to do more and you could expand that story. So is the writing process different for you when you like, okay, I have this 5 issues to tell this story, and without, this exact, immediate story where there are obviously, like you said, anthology, you could do more, where Nottingham, mid volume 1, you're like, maybe I can tell more in this world. Like, how does that change the process a little bit as a writer, or does it?
It doesn't really. I think especially in this sort of time in the industry, we're thinking in 4 and 5 issue lots of story.
Yeah.
I'd really love to be able to pitch something that's a bit more expansive, but obviously, um, the economics don't necessarily work out for certain publishers, so we try to keep it as tight as possible and put the threads in there for more, or set up some framework for more, but you only have so many pages to
Right.
tell the story that you're trying to tell, let alone set up future ones.
Right.
So you gotta think in the now always, I think, in comics, especially because it's a disposable medium and you have sometimes a direct line to the consumer. So you may lay plot threads and the consumer might latch onto something different in the story than you might have anticipated.
Mhm.
And then you have to really sort of think about that when you're doing it as well.
Yeah. So expand on that a little bit more. Like, you're saying like a direct line. Are you talking like feedback that you get from volume 1 of fans that
Oh
like kind of
yeah,
like it helps
I
shape
think
kind
that
of like maybe
the
what you do?
Marion love should have been unsurprising to me, and yet I was like, oh shit, people are really sorry if I'm swearing on
You're
your
fine.
podcast. It's like,
You're
I
fine.
haven't sworn in the first few minutes, so I hope that that's fine.
It's all good.
Bleep me if you must. But yeah, I think I really pulled Marion to the forefront because of that. Um, and really, like, you got her in the B plot throughout the entirety of volume 2, and she sort of has the big moment at the end. And I hope people really enjoyed that, because I was like, oh, how do I do this where I'm sending the sheriff off on his kind of own mission, but still keep the focus on her? So that B plot was sort of 70-80% driven by how people reacted to Marion in the first volume.
That's cool to hear, like, that, that what, people are consuming something you're putting out, and to kind of go with it a little bit sometimes, and heed thoughts of people like, I really love this character, maybe that's something we can expand on or something. I think that's cool, and that's something that you can do in this day and age with, in this medium, especially because comics, there is a larger comics like online community, right? Especially when it comes to indie comics, I feel like we feel as fans that we have a line to you as a creator sometimes more than you do in any other industry.
That is very true, and I think also the advent of the internet has sort of really exacerbated that,
Yep.
maybe in not so pleasant ways a lot of the time, but it's really nice to be able to have that interaction, especially when you're sort of so siloed, sort of like, even though it's a collaborative job, it is sometimes a very lonely process. And so you're just sitting in your cave, sort of throwing shit at the wall, and hoping it sticks. And I'm very glad that it did stick, and that we did get sort of a lot of interaction from people going, wow, what's this? Um, and I hope that's the case for the next thing and the next thing,
Yeah.
because it's hard to do if you don't get a lot of feedback.
Yeah. So, and I would say this, if you're listening, if there's something you love that you're reading, like, man, say something. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much negativity out there in the world and things. And so often, like, stuff happens, go, oh, I wish I would have, like, I love this. And like, well, just say something. Like, because creators like that. Like I imagine like there has to be something where you're like,
Love,
yeah,
love it.
like so if you're
Love
enjoying
hearing what
something,
you
share it.
yeah.
If you don't like it, don't talk about it. I'm just
And the secret is, right? What I'm saying is you there's a lot of people complaining about media and saying these are the things that I don't like about it.
yeah.
That will not change the to me, I don't see that as changing the direction or course of the things, the thing itself. But what I have been saying is that if you focus on the parts of it that you love,
Mhm.
that can steer the ship. Positivity has way more power than negativity.
It's so true. And you know, for prime example, I the book Minor Threats, there was a character in it, a small little character who was a barfly that just randomly popped up, and people on the internet started talking about it. And it now has its own spin-off series with Kyle Starks. It's coming, and stuff like that. Like, but it's
Oh
it's
yeah.
not like, oh, I didn't like this, you gotta change this. It was something like people noticed it in a comic, they liked it, and they started talking about it, and they say, well, let's give people what they want. Like, I think that's a cool thing, and that's I think what we're talking about a little bit more than like, I don't like this. This sucks.
Yeah, like I look at the Star Wars discourse lately, and I'm like, please, just tell me what you liked about this. Surely it has to be something,
Right.
you know.
I saw someone in the midst of that discourse that just said some of y'all didn't grow up with 20 years of no Star Wars, and it shows.
Or like that day, I saw Force Awakens, and like it's very much, look, it's very much a movie that sort of very paint by numbers,
Yeah.
and yet I cried at the end. It was more Star Wars.
It's more Star Wars.
By the time you hit the Last Jedi, people are so grumpy, and I'm just like, I take the view that all Star Wars is good because it's Star Wars, and I'm having a blast, even if it's not perfect. I'm still having a blast. It's a silly space opera. Like, don't take it that seriously.
Right.
Even if and it's a formative part of my childhood as well. Like,
Right.
I'm just enjoying the things that I enjoy about it, and not getting too bothered by the things that I don't. So.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway is, find what you love and enjoy it, and then and share about it, talk about it. It creators love that. Content creators, writers, artists, like they love to hear like when you're enjoying something, just the simplest like, hey, this was awesome, thank you. Because I think it just makes the world a better place. We just went off a rabbit hole because that's how I do it
That's
sometimes.
okay.
But uh, David, I want to respect your time. What else do you got? Anything else that you haven't got to promote, or is this like right now you're
Um,
in straight Nottingham Kosher Mafia mode?
I'm Nottingham Kosher Mafia mode, but I do have something coming out in Hello Darkness, which is a Boom horror anthology. I'm not sure exactly when my
Okay.
story will drop in the run, but it's coming. And I had a blast doing that. And I can't wait for people to see that too. They reached out, lovely people. It's so nice when you get that because like a lot of this job is like literally what I like to call sort of fights over scraps sometimes where you're like,
Yeah.
even though we sort of take this view that you're not competing with everybody in the way that people might expect,
Right.
it's still like it's still sort of a grind to build a network, get things greenlit. So yeah, it's so lovely when you get instead of having to like hound editors with emails, um, them reaching out to you is pretty special.
Yeah.
So
I bet. I can imagine. So, well, David, where can people follow along with you? So when announcements happen,
yeah,
and things are dropping.
Twitter and Instagram are the best places. And I'm on both of those platforms as David T. Hazan. You will also find my website at davidhazan.com, and I think I'm on Blue Sky just at David Hazan. Um, those are the best sort of places to follow me. Issue 13 of Nottingham should be coming out in the next couple of weeks, followed by 14 and 15 in, July and August. I think 15 drops at the end of August. Meanwhile, Kosher Mafia #1 drops on the 7th of August, and FOC is in a couple of weeks on the 8th of July.
Yeah. Gang, if for whatever reason you haven't read Nottingham, go back, pick up the past volumes, get volume 3 here and going out. And hopefully, us talking about Kosher Mafia, you're excited for it. First issue has me hooked. Hit up your local comic book shop. Tell them you want it. That's the best way that publishers know that they need what they need to make and create. And so if you think you might want to check it out, it's 5 issues. Put it on your pull. I telling you, issue 1 was I'm hooked. I can't wait for more. So hopefully you all will check it out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, David, thanks so much for coming back on talking comics with me. I feel like it's so good to just get to dig back into the Nottingham world and then explore now some new projects. So thanks for taking some time to talk about comics with me.
No worries.
So, well,
Absolutely.
gang, again, put those books on your polls, and hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out.